Hey, just want to welcome everybody that's joining us on Facebook Live, or if you're listening later on the Lust is Boring podcast. Got a great show for you today. First, want to make sure to remind you, if you want to come on pilgrimage with us, Father Agustino Torres and myself will be leading pilgrimages this summer, both to the Holy Land, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Sea of Galilee, and then another one to Krakow, Poland, to walk in the footsteps of St. John Paul II. We're going to go hiking up in the mountains where he used to go on retreat, spend his prayer time with God and hiking with young people. Both pilgrimages are going to be incredible opportunities. If you're a little hesitant, well, I don't know, all this coronavirus stuff. If you register for the pilgrimage and then COVID gets worse and we have to end up bumping it forward, you won't lose your deposits. We'll be able to insure both of those pilgrimages, so you're able to come with us with no risk whatsoever. So think about it, pray about it. Going with your roommate, friends, family. I know there's going to be amazing opportunities. If you've ever been to one of those places or neither, it is absolutely life-changing. Now, today's show is brought to you by Daily Catholic Wisdom. If you're not familiar with this is a collaboration between Cedar House, which is a Catholic content curator, and Ignatius Press. Now, I know Ignatius Press, if you're reading their stuff, it's going to be solid as can be. And so what they've done is kind of dove into their storehouse, treasure house trove of Catholic content, and then they send you just a daily, really short snippet of Catholic wisdom, whether it's from Mother Teresa or Mother Angelica, St. John Paul II, Archbishop Fulton Sheen. And the nice thing about it, they're super duper short, 1-2 sentences tops. And it's just an awesome way to start your day in a kind of a prayerful mindset. And so if you just go to catholicwisdom.com/chastity project or click the link down below in the show notes, you get these morning emails for free. And by you supporting these organizations like this that support Lust is Boring as sponsors, you're directly helping our podcast to grow and just to be in existence. And so please, everybody watching, just click the link, give it a try, check out these daily emails, and it's just a beautiful way to start your day. Now, as you know, if you do have questions you want us to answer on the show, we'd really encourage and invite you to consider becoming part of our patron community. Patreon.com/Jason Evert is where you can click to become a supporter. And some people give $5 a month, some people more, but you get all kinds of free stuff in exchange for doing that, whether it's free t-shirts, free books, autographed stuff, our emails. We'll be able to keep in touch that way. And you can send us messages of questions you want us to answer on the show, and we'll dive into that. And so the link, if you want to become a supporter on Patreon, it's a huge way to support our family and our ministry, is right below. You can click it and join. Basically, for less than a cost of getting like a Chipotle burrito once a month, you're able to keep this whole podcast up, growing, and spread the message. Now, today's show, we've got a lot of good stuff to cover today. We are going to talk about mental health and human sexuality and how these things come together and how sometimes they clash. Discussing COVID. Like if you're a single young adult, for example, and you're already dealing with the struggles of singleness, and now you pile social isolation on top of that, how do you navigate through that? I mean, that's tough. We're going to be talking about mental health and chastity, anxiety, sometimes that you're going through regarding temptation, even going to dive into some tough stuff like what is the real reason that men masturbate? We're going to take a peek at that with Dr. Greg Bottaro. We're going to look at how to actually listen to your partner, how to communicate effectively according to St. John Paul II in your romantic relationships. And so to help us unpack all of this and a lot more is Dr. Greg Bottaro. Now, Dr. Greg is a Catholic psychologist. He directs the Catholic Psych Institute, and he developed something called Catholic mindfulness. Now, before getting his doctorate, he spent 4 years living as a Franciscan friar under the mentorship of Father Benedict Groeschel. This experience helped him to form a spirituality based on abandonment to divine providence that he now applies to psychological principles in his practice. So I want to welcome Dr. Greg to the show. Thank you for coming on with us today.
Oh, so great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's a blessing. Now, for our listeners, like Catholic mindfulness, that might be like a new term for a lot of people.
Sure.
What do you? Some people might be hesitant. Like, was that like a New Age thing? Like, what is that? So, help unpack what is meant by just mindfulness, and then baptizing that with Catholic mindfulness.
Yeah, sure thing. So it does come from a Buddhist background. So that's where a lot of the study and research has been done. But what that has given us is really incredible insight into the workings of the human brain. And as we know from science, we can get truth from anywhere, and we can use truth as long as it's actually true. So this is actually really good science about the way the brain works, and it's been developed into this 8-week protocol of teaching and practicing and exercising what's called mindfulness. Well, when I started to learn and study that as a psychologist and implement that in my programs and in the work that I was doing clinically, I started to realize this is exactly what's happening in my brain when I pray. And this is how Father Benedict taught me how to pray. And I started going back through stuff and looking at abandonment to divine providence. That's something a little bit more familiar to some Catholics. There's trustful surrender, the practice of the presence of God, things like Brother Lawrence or Jean-Pierre de Caussade. These are writings from Catholic spirituality that are about being in the present moment. Ultimately, it goes back to Jesus telling us in Matthew 6:25, do not be anxious about the things of your life. So God expects us to find ways to not be anxious. And what comes from the mindfulness program is actually understanding cognitively, intellectually, what's happening to release some of that anxiety. So we have a spiritual reason for doing something that's humanly and cognitively healthy. And so that's what I've brought together for Catholic mindfulness.
No, it sounds very rich because, I mean, so much of our anxieties either has to do with something that's not the present moment. You know, I'm worried about what I did 4 years ago or what's going to happen next week or what's not going to happen after the inauguration or what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Like, because we're not living here, it's just way too much to pile on past and future. So that sounds like a pretty effective tool. So like for somebody, you know, who's living right now, you know, we were talking about beforehand that the singleness, how would they apply, you know, Catholic mindfulness or just coping with singleness when you pile upon that social isolation? I've got friends in New York City there, and they've told me like for the young adults living out there, I mean, it's rough. It's like this perfect storm. I mean, it's hard enough when you're just not around a lot of families. There's not a lot of marriage and kids running around. It's all these young professionals. And then now everybody's locked up in all their studio apartments. And even when they're together wearing masks and 6 feet apart, like how would you recommend for these, especially young adult singles who are already battling the challenges of singleness and uncertainty in the future, to deal with the stress of the present moment and being further isolated from one another? What are some tips that you could give for them to manage this and maintain their sanity in the midst of this singleness and isolation?
Yeah, great question. And so to break it down, like the cause, you know, with imagining scenarios where there are problems that need to be solved is one of our fortes. We're really good at that. Our brains are made for that, anticipating where there could be a problem. And so if we're not careful and we don't learn how to get in control of that capacity, we could end up spending hours upon days just spinning our wheels, coming up with all these problems. And this happens a lot of times when we hit our head on the pillow and we're supposed to be going to sleep. And all of a sudden, that's when the eyes open up and the brain goes crazy, coming up with everything that went wrong from the day, everything that could go wrong tomorrow. This is what our brain is good at. So we have to develop a capacity to be in control of that particular faculty of the mind. Sometimes it's good to do problem solving, but we should be in control of it, not letting it run wild. So what happens as a single person, there's all sorts of opportunities to imagine worst case scenarios, bad case scenarios. And in that time by ourselves, we might be doing that in our mind instead of being in the present moment. And my heart goes out to single people still discerning their vocation, figuring out what they're supposed to be doing, or living in that single space, because there's such an opportunity to develop an incredibly deep intimacy with God. And once you get into the ebb and flow of normal life, if that's not your normal life and you're looking forward to religious life or marriage or family life or whatever, then life takes over. And all sorts of other responsibilities are going to get in the way. And then you're going to realize, looking back, I had so much time. I could have been doing prayer, novenas, consecrations, adoration, studying, learning, reading, all these different things. So in this present moment, what I remind single people especially to do constantly is to embrace that part of your life that God has willed you to be in right now. This is the chapter God has willed you to be reading and part of and writing right now. So what's available to you in this present moment? And there's lots that's available. It's through the presence of God. There's a simple mindfulness prayer that I start every day with. I start almost every hour with. I end the day with. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. And this reminds us intellectually, brings to mind the ever-present reality of God, that in this moment, no matter what my fantasy mind can come up with that's not in this present moment, I am safe here in his embrace, in a relationship with him. And then I'm asking him to help me stay here in this present moment with him. And that's the absolute best way to reconnect with God in this moment and actually find peace no matter what is going on.
It's a neat way to look at it. So in a certain way, what anxiety is at the end of the day is a misuse of the gift of our imaginative faculties. And so God has given us this gift for our own survival because we need it and our creativity and everything. But we're taking that gift and allowing it to just get overrun with thoughts and fears. And it reminds me a bit of what St. Paul said in the letter to the Corinthians, where he's talking about singles. And he said, I wish you're all single, because like a single woman, he said, is anxious about the things of the Lord, whereas a single woman is anxious about how she might please her husband. And I think we're getting this backwards, where the single woman is anxious about her husband who hasn't shown up yet.
Right.
Where the heck is he? He's not showing up to daily mass. Instead of being anxious about the Lord, they're anxious about the guy who isn't even there. And then if the guy does show up in her life, she still won't be anxious about the things of the Lord.
Right.
There'll still be this deep unrest because she was not in the present moment.
Exactly. Yeah. The only way to actually make a gift of self in the most fruitful way possible is having that self-ownership where one has first submitted themselves to the fatherhood of God, which is to be in his peace, in his presence. And once we have that self-ownership through complete submission to the Father, then we have the freedom to make a gift of ourselves, and that gift becomes the most fruitful. And a lot of people are struggling in their marriages because they haven't figured out how to do that yet, because they didn't use their time of singlehood to learn how to have that kind of intimacy with the Father. And now they're going to have to work it out amidst all of the other regular anxieties of married life. And then children come into the picture. And this is more and more complicated and more difficult the further you go if you haven't sort of locked in or at least gotten a grasp of what that's like when you had that time for yourself.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it adds so much more to the stress of a marriage when, in a sense, one or both spouses has to backpedal of levels of spiritual development that were never set into place. And now you're trying to build up the structure, and level 2 of that foundation, is mush. And so, marriage is tough enough. And so if people can, do the hard work of marriage prep 5 or 10 years before their marriage, of working on themselves, it's such a gift to their future spouse. Now, as like everybody's, I think, got their own battles that they're fighting, but I'd love to hear your take on this. We got an email from one of the listeners of the show, and he said that he's an autistic male, and one of the things he recommended to us, interestingly, that I didn't know about was a podcast called Saint Dymphna's Playbook. It's apparently a Catholic. I had never even heard of this thing. You're familiar with it?
That's great. Oh yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, so it's I guess a podcast that focuses on mental health as it relates to our spirituality. But his question was that he's a guy, he experiences same-sex attractions, and he's on the autistic spectrum. And he said, I've had intrusive sexual thoughts for many years, struggling with same-sex attractions. And what was a comfort to him is he read a paper from a neuropsychologist at Columbia University. And he forwarded it to me, and he's obviously done his homework. But the article said that people with ASD, which is that autism spectrum disorder, had a larger total brain volume and cortical thickness and smaller volumes of specific brain structures, including the amygdala and parts of the basal ganglia like the nucleus accumbens. The ASD group also showed increased thickness of the frontal cortex, decreased thickness in the temporal cortex. And, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know that you are either, but he found great comfort and be like, okay, well, wait a minute. Maybe my temptations are a little different than everybody else's. Maybe if I'm more prone to OCD or hypersexualizing this or that it's not necessarily a license to indulge in that stuff, but maybe it grants me a little permission to be patient with myself and understanding where this is coming from. I read a psychologist. He said, we're going to make a lot more progress breaking free of this stuff and understanding our unwanted sexual behavior if we just have an understanding of it. And so what has been your experience in terms of what advice would you give to him as a guy who wrestles with autism, same-sex attractions, a little bit of OCD as well, he said, having patience with himself in the midst of this battle.
Well, this is everything. And this is what I love about the work that I get to do, because understanding our humanity, understanding what it is to actually be human is at the root of unlocking so many of these difficulties. And we get stuck because we're approaching the problems not in context of our actual humanity. And people tend to either over-spiritualize or over-materialize our humanity. And a lot of the secular world is over-materializing everything, not giving enough credit to the spiritual dimension of our humanity. But a lot of Catholics and a lot of people in spiritual circles will over-spiritualize and not give enough credibility to the material dimension of our humanity. But we are the unity of body and spirit. And so the brain is very much a part of who we are. And these structures and these functions, this physiology is a part of our experience. It's like if you're struggling with charity, you could actually get an injection of a chemical, and that hormone is going to affect your brain, and you're going to be the happiest, most loving person in the world. So it's not just a spiritual issue. I'm not saying we should all get injections of happy hormones, but
what's that shot? I could use
yeah,
it.
exactly. So, but the point is, we are susceptible to the brain, and we should understand the brain. And so, at the very root of it, the patience that we can give through that mercy and receiving God's forgiveness and receiving God's mercy and realizing that He knows what it's like. He was one of us. He entered into our humanity to help take us to His divinity. And it's that experience that we need to realize is a justification for our own self-forgiveness and receiving that mercy. So if we start from a place of patience, it's going to be a lot easier because we're not trying to do the impossible. We can't expect perfection of ourselves to be without flaw. That's pride. And that's actually very clear in the teachings of the church fathers and Jesus's words that this is not the path. The path to be is as a child. And children know they make mistakes. And there's all sorts of reasons. Yeah. So when it gets into actually breaking down psychological difficulties and disorders or troublesome behaviors, the very lightest way of understanding it, getting into the brain systems and understanding what's happening here can be very helpful because it relieves the pressure of that expectation of perfection. And when we're starting from that place, that pressure gone allows us to see what we're actually capable of, because then ultimately God's grace floods in. When we let ourselves be like children, when we submit ourselves in humility, that is what opens the door to God's grace. And that's how we can actually grow and overcome these behaviors. So that's the spiritual dimension. Psychologically, we can actually make changes in the brain through the connections that we make, understanding what's happening there. And so that problemsome behavior, we get control over by understanding what's actually happening there in the building blocks of it. And there's ways that I've seen that work really well with obsessive compulsive disorder, people that have severe anxiety, scrupulosity, with different autism spectrum things, and then also other sort of like addictive behaviors, masturbation, other things with sexuality. When we get into the nitty-gritty of the hormones, the brain structures, those kinds of things, it's almost like we're relieving the pressure from the expectation that we're supposed to just spiritually pray our way out of this or figure it out, and somehow we're not good enough if we can't do that.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. I remember when I was growing up, my best friend in high school had severe OCD. And I remember he actually had to get kind of sent off to a mental, institution in New York and left, the state. And it was a really rough time. And I remember being in adoration with my friends. We did a rosary for him, praying, for him because they didn't know what was going to happen. And, he called me back like 3 days later, he's like, hey, you'd never believe it. He said they found out the medication they were giving me to treat the OCD was actually making my OCD worse. And now they switched me to a new med and I feel like $1 million. And so like sometimes the spirituality and psychology, mesh together. And I think it adds a lot of credibility when you have, professionals like yourself saying, hey, you need the spiritual element. Just as good as it is to hear a priest talk about how important the psychological piece is. I was having dinner just a week ago with an anesthesiologist, and he told me that he will not perform anesthesia, and he's already told his colleagues this, if they present a patient to him who needs to get knocked out in order to have a gender affirmation surgery or the sex change operation, he said, don't even ask me to knock that person out with anesthesia, because he says, look, I look at the medical charts and the list of medications that that person is already on for the challenges they're having in their life. To knock them out, to mutilate their body, to think that somehow that's going to solve the deeper issues, that is malpractice. And so he had an understanding like, hey, you know, some of these things need medical treatment, some of these things psychological, spiritual, but we have to attack it from a whole human perspective. So what would you suggest to somebody who's got a lot of anxiety about temptation in general? Well, you know, whether it's a scrupulosity of like, oh, wait, I just thought about a woman. Did I just offend God? Am I in mortal sin? Should I receive communion? Oh, wait, now I'm distrusting God. Maybe I made him angry. I wonder if he's angry about the fact that I wonder if he's angry. They get kind of in this hamster wheel of anxiety as it relates to temptation. You know, what would you say to them in terms of maintaining peace of heart or whatever helpful tools psychologically they could hang on to if they're wrestling with whether it's scrupulosity or just anxiety in general about temptation in the future or even the past?
Yeah, you know, I want to be careful answering this question here because it's such a sticky issue and it's such a very deep brain issue that if we try to be too like sort of superficial with an answer, it can almost actually make it worse. And one of the first pieces to really being able to make progress with somebody in these areas is to establish a relationship of trust. And we need relationship. This is the foundation of how we grow and how we heal. And so I would say, I mean, honestly, this is something that the virtual retreat I've developed with the Catholic Mindfulness Program. There's an 8-week program that I've baptized the whole thing, and then I've put it into daily videos that I call it the virtual retreat. It's a Catholic mindfulness virtual retreat. So people can go to catholicpsych.com/store, catholicpsych.com/store, and then that's where you can get access to the virtual retreat. So when it comes to anxiety, especially to that extreme, when it's scrupulosity, that's one of the most difficult sufferings that we deal with in our practice. And it's really sort of like this unknown suffering that a lot of people are actually really devastated by. And it's such an internal and hidden cross that it's really hard to express or explain exactly what that can do. You had a friend who went through that and had to go to the hospital, so you somewhat understand that. But people, and I'm sure a lot of people share with you some of their struggles, but you know, for the wider audience, it's a hidden cross. And it's one of the most stickiest to really get people to sort of break free from. Yeah. But there, you know, there's a lot of spiritual writing. You know, Father Jacques Philippe, we're doing a book study now with my integrated life community. It's in his Searching for and Maintaining Peace, part 1, he talks a lot about not doing battle with the devil on the battlefield of thought. He's going to win every time. And as soon as you start going into that cycle where I'm going to figure my way out of this, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And that's just a little sliver, maybe get a foot in the door there. But I would say like really working on trusting in the presence of God more than your ability to figure it all out. That's going to be the key.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's gold. That idea of not engaging the devil on the intellectual level because of how far an angelic intellect would surpass a human one. I was praying the other day about a tough matter of just like, God, what's the answer here? I've been asking you for years. Am I going to do this? Am I supposed to do that? You know, and I figured like if I just ask him hard enough and I just do enough, I'm going to get the answer, when a reality is that he wants me to give him the mystery. He wants me to entrust to him the mystery of the whole situation instead of thinking that if I just tried hard enough, I'd get ABC, left, right, up, down, instruction manual kind of stuff. And it's just like, that's my brain of just like, hey, there needs to be a solution. And if I don't have it yet, I'm not praying hard enough. When it's just like, no, abandonment to divine providence. Like, give me the mystery instead of trying to solve this Rubik's Cube and then getting all loss of consolation because you're not getting the clarity that you want.
Yeah. That's the sticky point. It's so hard to remember that. Like, we're not in control. We're not supposed to be in control. We're supposed to submit that control to the Father and really trust him and be as a child in his arms.
Yeah, no, and one of the things I often tell guys who are struggling with scrupulosity or girls of just the very fact that you care about offending God shows that you love him. Because if you really were as far from God as you think you are, you wouldn't care about it. Like, people aren't far from God. I mean, like, Hitler wasn't wake up and I wonder if I'm offending God. Like, if that was his battle, it would show that the Holy Spirit is already working in that soul. The very fact
Yeah.
that you're anxious about your relationship with God shows that God is alive in you. You just got to make sure to know that you are already loved. It's not a performance-based relationship like that maybe you had with your dad. That if I just try hard enough, I'll get that nod from the father. Whereas like if
Right.
I strike out 3 times in the game and he doesn't talk to me on the way home, I just feel like an abysmal failure. So I
Mm.
like the fact that you're telling, hey, this is not a Cliff Note answer. We need to get under the hood. We need to take a deep dive to really
Yeah.
elevate some of the stuff.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. That's a great point. It's true, and that's especially when it gets to mortal sin, because then people are removing themselves from communion,
Mm-hmm.
and that is devastating. It's like, no, like that's the sacrament of healing in this case. Like that's where we want to grow in communion,
Mm-hmm.
and like yeah, mortal sin is like a worthy consideration in at large,
Yeah.
but in that case where you're so overwhelmed by anxiety because of the fear of sinning, like clearly your heart's in the right place, and that's not your intention to sever your relationship with God in areas of grave matter. So
Yeah.
that's not the case. So go to communion.
Yeah. And a little theology 101. A lot of people, I think, don't understand the difference between mortal sin and grave matter. They think if a sin is grave matter and they commit it, they've committed a mortal sin. Well, we
Right.
also have, do I have adequate reflection? Do I have sufficient consent? Are there factors of immaturity or anxiety or addiction at play? And if you've got to sort through all this and you don't know what, go to a good confessor, find a good priest, follow him and be obedient to him. Even if your conscience is like, well, I don't know, like just be obedient. Trust the authority in this case. So let's switch a little bit in terms of, personal sexual sins. Guys who might be struggling with their purity, not with their girlfriend, but with themselves. We had mentioned, like, what do you want to talk about today? And you had mentioned in an email, what about the real reasons men masturbate? And I think a lot of people are like, what? Well, maybe it's just because, hey, we're men. We got temptations and porn's all over the place. It's just inevitable. What would you say are under the layers of, the world of flesh and the devil? What are the real reasons that guys are falling into this particular vice?
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast recently from a colleague of mine, Dr. Peter Malinowski, and he was giving these, I don't know if you want me to give you right now, the top 10 list that men say they masturbate, and then there's a top 10 list of clinically what it seems are the actual reasons.
Okay, sure.
I'll run
Yeah.
through it really quickly.
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
top 10 reasons why men say it. It's number one is just lust. I want the pleasure. I'm weak. I don't have the willpower to distress or calm down. It's out of habit. It's anger. It's boredom. Maybe the wife or the girlfriend, whoever is cold and sexually distant, preventing acting out with a girlfriend. It's like sort of a material or utilitarian sort of thing. Because I'm a bad person, the devil made me do it because of temptation, or maybe they just don't know why, and they're just really, really frustrated with themselves because, like St. Paul, they do the things they don't want to do and they can't do the things they want to do. So those are like sort of like the superficial things. And what happens is when we just sort of have those quick answers, it's really easy to not actually engage on a deeper level to unblock the things that are blocking us from making real change. And all of those things that I just listed, it's like, all right, try harder. Don't be angry. Don't, you're just not fighting temptation hard enough. That you could say that every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
Like
don't
that's never
experience
gonna
stress. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You're gonna have a lot of stress for the rest. Like that's not all that's going on. So if we go deeper, now these are all different answers for all different walks of life, and I think you have a pretty wide audience. So, but there might be loneliness that's happening at a very deep level, kind of going back to even like the kid coming home from the baseball game, like not connecting with the father, and there might be a sort of a gap, a chasm between actually being held and brought into deep relationship and intimacy with a man, and being delicate around and sensitive around this issue, but like holding manhood is almost a way of connecting with the manhood. And so there's like these deeper sort of psychological issues that are happening there, and things are being fulfilled, or at least the attempt to fulfill wounds is actually what's happening there. So maybe it actually has to do with even a better relationship with men, maybe growing in friendship with other men, not just because you need somebody to call you out and hold you accountable and all this stuff, because we need intimacy with other men. So that might actually be one of the things there. There might be fears of abandonment. There might be insecurity. it needs to be said that a lot of people have suffered from sexual trauma, so there might be some living out of some kind of trauma, especially if it was at the actions of a male figure. A lot of times that turns into a difficulty unsticking from this kind of behavior. Interestingly, there could be a spiritual dimension to a fear of growing in intimacy with God. And this is like a very superficial way that we sort of throw the sin back in there. And it's like an easy way to keep distance from God. It's a sin that doesn't, quote unquote, hurt anybody else. That's how we justify it. And it's like there might be something else going on there on a spiritual level. And then for married men, there might be like very deep breaks in communication. And it may be a sort of resentment of acting out, or something else that's playing into there. So those are just a few of the deeper channels that we could get into, but those are a lot of the other reasons that are going on there.
So you'd advise, like, for a guy who's wrestling in that, like, to just be still, go to spend a holy hour and really just start asking the Father, not just mere human introspection, but asking the Holy Spirit to reveal. Like,
yeah.
what's the fuel behind this? Because the world will tell the kid, well, it's reasonable to do that stuff. You've got urges and this will help get rid of the urges. And it's like, well, no, it's like putting lighter fluid on a fire and say, hey, that'll help get rid of the fire. It's like, well, no, there's got to be something, fueling this. So would you say that's what they got to do, of just like go and be still and listen and try to see what ache underneath is crying out that this is claiming
100%.
to satisfy?
100%. And that's something we go very deep into with Catholic mindfulness in the virtual retreat, is learning how to be still and listen to the voices that are underneath what we can hear. In the unconscious mind, there are narratives and things that we tell ourselves. And like Elijah going out into the cave, we have to listen for the still small voice. And it's not just the voice of God, although that's there too. It's even the voices that are coming from within ourselves. And we have to go through the noise of the storms and the fire and the rain and the wind. That's the stuff that's consciously heard. And we go to the unconscious, which is the still small voice. And then we discover, there's a narrative coming from this. It's like, oh, you're a piece of garbage. Oh, why would you even try to change that? This is the best that you're worth. This is what you deserve. You keep trying and you keep failing, just like in everything else. There are going to be these voices. And here's the thing. People say like, oh, it's biology. Oh, we're really animals. Like we have these urges and all this stuff. Yes, that's true. But we are actually humans. We're more than animals. And no matter what our biology brings to the table of our human experience, we will never be satisfied just being animals. And so satisfying the urge is actually not what we're made for on that biological level. We're made for being a human who is satisfying the deepest urge of our humanity, our human hearts. And so it's never actually going to be a path to happiness. And in fact, another dimension that we look at, I learned this from Dr. Paul Witt, a famous Catholic psychologist who taught at the program I went to. And we're talking about masturbation and the shame that ensues as a form of self-harm. Because everybody knows the feeling who masturbates of what comes after. Yeah. And you only have to do it once to know what you feel like when it's done. And that feeling of emptiness, of shame, of confusion, of whatever that is, that's going to happen. Yeah. And so you can't possibly think you're going into this behavior somehow like blind and blocking that out. You're blocking it out of your conscious mind in that moment when you're being enticed by the lust, but you're not humanly actually ignorant of what's coming next. So there's actually a cycle of shame that occurs, and we feel like this is what we deserve. We set ourselves up for this, and then we feel that feeling that we sort of set ourselves up to feel with in the first place. It's like an emotional cutting. It's like we're cutting our bodies. Instead of that immediate displeasure, it's the displeasure that comes afterwards, and we're setting ourselves up for that. So whatever these narratives are, exactly to your point, learning how to be quiet, learning how to silence everything of the noise. First of all, just to sit in 10 minutes in silence alone is like a near impossible task for our culture. But to actually develop that skill and learn how to be in silence and then listen to what's happening inside, and the way that we're talking about ourselves to ourselves is going to be revealing so much of our own wounds and what's actually motivating our behavior.
Man, there's so much gold in there that we could dive into, but I love the insight, a couple of just what makes us truly human. Yes, we might have an urge for the satisfaction of these erotic desires, but it's not the indulging in them that makes us human. It's precisely the mastery over our desires that distinguishes us from the beasts. Because a chimpanzee is unable to say, "No, I'm going to fast, from bananas for a greater good." Like they're incapable of resisting the instinct and the impulses. So it's precisely the self-control that makes us most fully human. But in order to really have that, we've got to take that deeper look. I remember reading a book, you probably may have read it, Healing the Unaffirmed, Recognizing Deprivation Neurosis by Bars and Trua. I read that in college when I was getting that mental health degree. And, his premise is that, at every level of human development, we need to have certain emotional needs met. And if they're not met at a certain level of emotional maturity and development, in a certain sense, we stay at that level of maturity and development. So you might have a 38-year-old dad who's having a full-blown temper tantrum during a Little League game because he has no idea how to harness these passions that were really rooted in the fact that, he wasn't affirmed and all this stuff. And so I've talked to guys and tried to apply some of these principles that sometimes when you're looking at porn, you're not really necessarily just looking at porn to see the woman, although there's a great motivation there because the beauty. And a lot of times they're looking to be seen by the porn. To be looked at in a desirable way when there's so much self-loathing because they're, by falling back into the porn and back into the masturbation, we're reliving this narrative, this script that you are weak, that you're not enough. And by going back to that, we're just reinforcing, well, failure is who I am, so might as well dive back into the same old dumpster.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're working with men with these addictions, one thing that we look at and really talk about, and again, in a place of safety and sensitivity and reverence, is like, what are the particular qualities of the kind of pornography that they were drawn to? And by unpacking a little bit, like, what are these different dimensions? Like, what was your fantasy being built out of? And you could find so many interesting and important and effective narratives within the fantasy and realize that they're trying to work through these unresolved things. And this made me think of this, is that I just recently was working in the last year with somebody, and the kind of video he was looking for was like a very unprofessional, and it allowed him to sort of enter into this fantasy of being seen. And it was like this connection that he was looking for. And it wasn't about the other woman that he was looking at. It was like imagining himself in that scene, because for him, that was giving him that validation. And it was so important to uncover that for him to actually break free from that addictive process. Yeah. And so it's a really important point.
Yeah, because I mean, imagine somebody guys wrestling with just feeling unwanted by women, of just being inferior and not, because I mean, we all desire to be desired by beauty. And when that's not fulfilled on a basic child level of your own mother or whatever, then, we're constantly craving that. Or maybe if we're just the kid growing up that never got that female attention, there might even be resentment towards women, and then anger involved, where they're sexualizing their anger and revenge and stuff. And so understanding, I remember when I was writing, Matt Fradd and I did this little forged book, but there was a guy, Jay Stringer, you probably read some of his stuff.
Yeah, great.
I love this quote where he talks about, healing requires you to pivot from condemning your lack of willpower to addressing the role trauma may be playing in your unwanted sexual behavior.
Yes.
A heart with an ounce of kindness for your life story will accomplish so much more for you than a mind filled to the brim with strategies to combat lust.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. 100%. I love that. It's so, and this is the mercy. This is the mercy. Christ reaching down in the dirt to pick up the woman caught in sin, and like, love first. Yeah. And yeah, of course we're going to get to the go and sin no more, but like the love for, it's not just semantics. It's not accidental. Yeah. It's the key that opens the door. It's the only way to get through the door. That has to be there. Mm-hmm. If it's not there, it's putting more padlocks on the door by coming through without that love. It's everything.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people jump into a vocation hoping that that's going to be the fulfillment. Well, okay, I can't look at the porn, or I can't sleep with my girlfriend. Like, I'll get married, I'll become a priest. and that's going to be able to deal with a lot of these issues of not being wanted, not being desired. And they see a vocation as some type of remedy rather than a calling. So how important could you even overestimate the importance of taking care of your mental health prior to marriage? That is one of the most important steps of marriage prep, is your own mental health.
100%. This is what I was talking about, like embracing that singlehood and like allowing that to be a time to develop intimacy with God and knowledge of self. St. Augustine's prayer, those two things are the most important, to know God and to know ourselves. And I teach, our model from Catholic Psych and the framework that we use is this model of the school of love from the family. And even going back to what we were talking about before, mom and dad together form this educative foundation. And the way dad relates to son forms the son in how to be a man. The way that dad relates to daughter teaches a daughter how to be loved by a man. And the way that dad loves mom teaches the daughter what to expect in being a woman and what she's growing into, teaches son how to love a woman, and then vice versa. The woman loving dad teaches daughter how to love men and and teaches son how to expect to be loved by women. So if any of those crosses, those interacting relationships and dynamics are flawed, you could be mom's favorite, but you are taking the place of mom always begrudging and talking down to dad. It's not going to matter. You're getting a flawed education. You're being miseducated. We have to work through that stuff before we're free to really make ourselves a fruitful gift. And it doesn't always happen perfectly. It hardly ever happens perfectly. People work it out in the context of marriage, but that's when it's really messy. And that's why marriage can be very painful and difficult. And by God's design, that's how we work out our salvation and grow in perfection, by sticking it out, by remaining faithful to the vows, by believing in that as a bigger thing than our own desires, so that when it gets grueling and we want out, we stick it out anyways, and then we actually embrace our own conversions and transformations. But it doesn't have to be that messy on this psycho-spiritual, psycho-emotional level if we do a lot of that heavy lifting before we even enter into that relationship. So I recommend that 1,000% over and over and over again for people in their single life. Embrace this, like go after it, like spend a month, 2 months. In fact, I've revamped our entire program. In fact, we're doing a live town hall tomorrow night that we're going to announce this whole new program. Like, I want to give people abilities to say, like, I just want to work on myself for the next month, for the next 2 months. Like, I'm in a space of time where, like, I'm all in, and we are going all in with people, working with people every day, not just like this once a week thing, but like totally revamping what mentorship and accompaniment is supposed to look like from a position of Catholic psychology and Catholic faith, and what it means to really mentor somebody. And it's like, if you're single and you're like not even dating, or if you're engaged and now you're like, okay, it's about to get serious, embrace this time. Like, now, don't wait for everything to hit the fan and for some emergency to fix. Get it in now and really dredge up where this miseducation has misled you and fix the thing so you can be that gift of self to your spouse.
Now, for the people who are listening, I can imagine there's women listening, and maybe she's 23, 24 years old, grew up in just like a toxic, dysfunctional family where maybe the dad was alcoholic, the mom was just incessantly bickering and cutting down the father. And like, now she's out on her own, living a successful professional life, wants to get married, but just knows she has like no concept of how to love rightly, no concept of how to honor a man who doesn't even honor himself. And she's thinking like, I want something, but I don't know how to get there. And for those watching on Facebook Live, they can tune in tomorrow night to the town hall. For those who hear this on the podcast, when it gets released a week from now, can they go back and watch that? How can they plug in to learn like, okay, I want to fill in those gaps of 18 years of spousal love that I was supposed to witness, that I never had a ticket to that show because my parents entered marriage broken themselves and never got the pieces put together. Where do people go who might be watching this later go to start that process of, undoing those knots?
Yeah. So our website is catholicpsych.com, and catholicpsych.com/town hall. I think they're going to put up like the replay video afterwards. So like whatever, it's live tomorrow night, and we'll have Q&A and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth showing up live. But then afterwards, we're going to keep it up there so that people can still get in there and learn about this program. Here's the beautiful thing about it. We're built for this. This is like the sort of secret sauce. It's like when you have the blueprint and we know that we're built for this, there's so much hope. You know, we have a lot of people struggling to sort of like redirect and guide. It's like shooting in the dark without knowing like exactly how to do this. But I've witnessed miracles over and over again by collaborating with God's grace, by being open, especially in marriage when there's a sacrament, like working with couples with the sacrament actually present on the couch in between the people. Like miracles happen every day and in our work. And it's beautiful to watch. It's like, how is this working so well? Oh yeah, this is what we're made for. Wait, oh yeah, that's what Christ promised us. Like this shouldn't be a surprise. But we do have to know how to connect these dots. And so for that girl, you know, I tell people all the time, we're all broken, by the way, by miseducation from our parents. And I make this point very clear. This is not about beating up on anybody. And in fact, I then point the finger directly at myself. And I make it very clear. Every night I pray to St. Joseph, please make up for my mistakes I made today. I miseducated my children today. Please make up for that. And the way that I treated my wife, the way that I treat my kids, like any little bit of impatience, lack of charity, lack of concern, whatever it is, we're made for perfection. That's the model and image that we're built out of and what we're made for. So we're constantly off track. But because we're made for that, and because we have baptism through Jesus Christ, through that sacramental grace, we all have access to the heart of Christ, and we are being transformed. We all have access to the heart of the family, the holy family, the perfect school of love. So we are literally healed psychologically through our baptism by Mary's motherhood. It's not just a spiritual reality, because Jesus is not just a spirit. We are united to Christ in his fullness. Our humanity is healed in his humanity, which was raised by a mom and a dad, so we can be re-raised by a mom and a dad. And this happens like that if we actually know how to connect the dots. It's mind-blowing how this works. So that young girl, broken family, toxic, whatever, there's so much hope because you're actually made for more than that. Mom and dad were temporary teachers. And just like if you go to a college that teaches you lies about the world, you graduate, you move on, you learn the truth. You don't have to be burdened and determined by whatever your parents or whatever that school miseducated you on. You learn the truth. You're an adult now. You can put these things together and you can lead a different life based on faith and learning what's really true. And all of a sudden, your heart and your mind and your whole person flourishes.
Yeah. So if a person's finding themselves in a relationship, whether it's marriage, dating, whatever, how can they actually communicate effectively to their partner about this stuff? Because a lot of times, you know, when stress hits and triggers, you know, what do they say in psychology? That sometimes you go back to your adaptive child, meaning like when you're a kid and you went through stress, you found a way to survive through that. You know, maybe it was by controlling a situation, maybe by withdrawing from the situation, maybe by attacking the person. Like you had some go-to that you went to for conflict resolution. And 9 times out of 10, it's not the best solution because you weren't watching the best solution. So if a person finds themselves in a situation now, whether it's in a marriage, and they just want to, I just want to know how to communicate better with my spouse. So they're actually hearing what I'm saying. I know you've studied the writings of St. John Paul II, any insights he might give on just how to effectively communicate with your husband, your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah. So yeah, first point is that it goes back to that childhood wound, like you were talking about before with Conrad Bars. And it's, you know, we get stuck in that place where mom and dad are the creator. So we're unsafe unless they validate us. We have to grow and mature with our faith to realize that actually there's a creator who's bigger than mom and dad. So we're actually safe. Even if we feel invalidated, we believe by faith that we're actually safe. Okay. So if that's true, then we can learn a different way to relate. We can branch out beyond our childhood mannerisms and methods. And so the right way to communicate, and we've all heard this before, but I want to ground this a little bit more deeply, is there are 2 roles to communication. There's the speaker and the listener. But this is actually how God created us in his image based on Trinitarian communion. There's giving and receiving. And we're used to this if we know theology of the body. So the giving has to be received. The receiving is in a sense a gift. And then there's actually in between man and woman a sharing of roles, a switching of roles. So In communication, you're either the speaker or you're the listener, and you have to know which mode you're in. Because we're in space and time, we don't do things eternally and infinitely the way God does. We have to know, okay, for these next 5 minutes, I'm in the listening role. And when we're in the listening role, we have to be listening not only with our mouth not talking, but with our minds. And we're so good, we can be good at closing our mouths and letting the other person speak because I'm listening, but we're actually thinking over the other person.
We're formulating a rebuttal.
We're like, already know, okay, that's wrong. You misremembered this. That's incorrect. This is how I'm going to prove my point. All right, just go ahead. Are you done yet?
Yeah.
Exactly. So in that back and forth, in that ebb and flow, there have to be these crystallized roles of communication. And then when you're listening, John Paul II talks about this in Love and Responsibility. Around page 200, he has a short section on tenderness. And what he talks about is to enter into the world of another person is what tenderness is. But not just that, because that's empathy. Empathy is to put yourself in another person's shoes, which is important. But there's a second step which makes it tenderness. And tenderness is to make the other person know that you're putting yourself in his or her shoes. How do you do that? Through your words. So listening is not just keeping your mouth shut. Listening sometimes is talking, but the things you're saying are indicating that you're understanding what the other person is saying. That's still listening. So then we hear these phrases like you might say to somebody, it sounds like what you're saying is you feel upset because XYZ. That's incredibly important. It's not enough for you to just have it in your head. No, I know what she's saying. I know where she's going with this. I know how she feels, blah, blah, blah. But you lock that inside your own brain. That's never going to build a bridge. Tenderness is when you put it into words. Even if it's 100 times that it's been said before, you feel really neglected right now because I didn't recognize that this is what you wanted. That's how you feel. You don't have to agree with it. You could completely disagree with it. We're not talking about your feelings right now. You're talking about the other person's feelings. And then when the other person hears that, it lowers anxiety, it increases affiliation and friendship, and you join together in a sense of unity that is impossible without that tenderness. And you can have a half hour. I say it like this. You can have a half hour of conversation where you have 15 minutes, each person trying to make your own point, and walk away totally enemies. Or you can have a half hour talking, still remain divided on agreeing on the issue, but 15 minutes spent, two people understanding one side, and the other 15 minutes, two people spent understanding the other side. And you walk away a half hour later feeling together and unified because of how you spent that half hour. And you might still totally disagree with each other, but you walk away closer. Yeah. So this is the dimension of creating unity in our diversity and our differences and being able to come together through communication.
I think this is great to hear, especially from a man's perspective, because I mean, we're not always the best listeners. I've had my wife tell me, like, Jason, you're not a really good listener. And I've told her, like, I'm a motivational speaker, not a motivational listener. And obviously, she thought that was very funny and witty on my part. But it's not something we're great at. Or sometimes she's like, Jason, are you listening to me? And like my answer, like, I can tell you're speaking. Like I'm aware you're speaking, but it's so different than listening. And I think from a guy's speaking, when men tend to communicate, it's like to exchange information back and forth, right. Point to point. Like, right. I think the Brooklyn Nets are great. Well, KD's great, but like you guys don't have defense. Lakers are going to beat you in the finals. Well, I think that, and it's just information wars, right. Whereas, authentic listening is so different. Like when a man has a problem, typically we go to someone for a solution, right? Like, okay, my tires are wobbling, maybe it needs to be realigned or tire rotation. Imagine you go to like Toyota and say, hey, yeah, my tire's been wobbling. I think I need my tires rotated. And the guy says to you, that must be really hard. And you're like, well, yeah, it is. And I'll bet that makes you feel yeah, you change the tires, man. Like, I don't want your sympathy. I want a solution. And so I think a lot of times we take that into the relationships, like, okay, she's presenting me with a problem. It's like that. You've probably seen that nail in the head video that they've got on YouTube. For those of you who haven't seen this, I want you to Google, lady with a nail in her head video communication. It's right. This lady where she's sitting there talking to like her husband on the couch. And she's like, I just have this ache in my head and it won't get away. And all my sweaters are getting snagged. And I just this throbbing pain. And the husband's there like, it might it might be the nail coming out of your forehead. She's like, it's not
There's
the nail.
nail coming.
Yeah, she's got physically a nail coming out of her forehead. And she's like, you always want to solve things. He's like, but I really think if we could just get that out, like, why would you just listen? And then at the end, he's like, that must be really hard. And she said, thank you. It's just like, to a man's brain, it's like, dude, that's what you want? All right, but we're not going to get anywhere.
Like, this is what I do this with men all the time, because that's the initial impression. But then if you learn these steps and you get the program and you get the instruction manual for how to effectively communicate, it actually turns out that men are oftentimes better communicators than women. Because men can compartmentalize and they can actually step into the other person's world and leave their own feelings behind easier than a woman will find, because of the way her brain is mapped. Mm-hmm. So once a man gets over that initial hurdle of realizing, like, no, this is the way. And it's like, I'm going to build a shed. I need my instructions. Like, tell me step 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, okay, man, step 1, close your mouth. Okay, step 2, close your mind to your own thinking. Okay, I think I got that. Okay, step 3, try to imagine what she's actually feeling. Like, okay, it's like caveman, like, got it. But men can be really good at it. Yeah. We just have to learn that that's what we're supposed to do. Realizing, like, I tell men this too, like, you didn't marry a man. There's a good reason for that. Like, this is a woman, again, going back to, like, understanding brains, the brain differences here are so radical. And once you get that, it's like, we think we want to communicate with somebody who's the same as us. But that's actually, that's what's missing in homosexuality. It's like, you're only getting the same thing as what you are. That's ultimately not going to actually be fulfilling. But you married somebody who's entirely other than you. So that means you're learning a whole entirely different way to communicate. Once you get that, and it's the same for women, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. And I shouldn't be resentful about that. Like, this is the beauty of the other. And reverencing the differences and accepting these differences and then growing towards unity through the differences is actually God's original plan. Before the fall in the garden, before the fig leaves created the separation, we had to hide and then doubt the differences and be suspicious of the other and then form resentments. We were meant to actually accept with full view, full vision of the full nakedness of the other person, with reverence and awe and desire for communion through those differences. So this is as real today as it was in the garden. And so today we need to take down the leaves and realize, like, oh, you're a woman. You're different than me. So you're not going to just need to fix it. You want to talk about emotion. Your brain is built that way. And for a woman to say that about her man, your brain's not the same as me. Thank God I don't just have a spouse that I'm just going to go, talk for hours about the emotion of it. That's like being married to a woman. I signed up for something different than that. And there's beauty in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And thus the importance of having male-female friendships, where a wife can have girlfriends that can be her girlfriends.
Oh,
instead of expecting the husband to be a male girlfriend.
Right.
Granted, we could learn some of these skills. I remember years ago, I worked at Catholic Answers, and there was one guy in the office in leadership. I think he was the vice president at the time. But he was so good at listening. And it was evident in any board meeting, we're all in there talking, you'd say a point and he'd say, okay, what I hear you saying is da-da-da-da-da-da. And he would just bullet point what you just said. And there was just this relief instantaneously of he got it. He heard it. And it just made you so much want to be part of the team, knowing that someone's actually repeating something back to you, even if they might disagree with 3 out of the 4 points. And I don't know about you, but I get locked into kind of fact checker mode. When my wife and I are getting into something, I'm like, well, that is erroneous, and this one is not nuanced properly, and just get so hung up and kind of point in a defensive posture that you can't receive anything when you're playing defense.
And this is a beautiful part of also our humanity. We're created for this unity, and Pope Benedict talks about this, that we're made for this communion and the development of the personality through receptivity of the other. So it's the masculine feminine genius, when we talk about those as 2 separate things, are actually meant to be received and given to each other so that each of us becomes a better version of ourselves. So that man in the office probably had a really good relationship with his mom, because as starting from childhood, he's receiving her feminine genius, and he's being formed to be a better man, not less of a man, but a better man by becoming, I don't like this word at all, but I'm not going to say feminized, but by receiving some of her feminine genius. When we receive a gift, it should change us. And by receiving that gift of the other, when it's the opposite sex, it changes us. We become better. And so that's why older married couples become hopefully better versions of themselves. And women become a little more compartmentalized. Men become a little bit more empathic and connected in unity with other humans, caring more about what other people feel. This is natural human development. This is how God made us. And we need to not only accept our differences, but reverence them for being the path towards our own sanctification.
Now, close with this. I mean, you mentioned feminine genius, masculine genius. We always hear about feminine genius, right? It's in papal writings. I mean, it's a well-developed topic. And people ask me like, well, what's masculine genius? And I'm like, well, like we barbecue, like we can do that. Like, but like, what is masculine genius? And I mean, it almost sounds pompous to put the words together, but what is that specific gift, a charism that God has given to our masculinity, that gift that we bring to the table?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a journal article mapping this whole thing out to brain science. If we look at the brain differences between a male and a female brain, and then we can actually flesh that out in language of genius through personality characteristics, understanding that we're meant to develop the characteristics of the other. So this is not a fine line, split between this is what a man is, this is what a woman is. Mm-hmm. I define genius as the characteristics that come naturally to a particular gender based on their biology. It's where we're starting from. Mm-hmm. It's not where we're meant to end. But with that being said, the feminine genius is one that's more internal and related to relationship, disposed towards relationship, and man is more distanced from relationship. And he can, like I said before, compartmentalize and separate out the different nuances of emotion and thoughts that come with being in the relationship. And the way I look at it is if you have two people who are charged with bringing a human person into the world, and one of them is meant to be looking inwards to where that child is developing, and the other person is meant to be looking outwards so that he can forge the path and that he can provide and protect and defend from outside enemies. And so that's where the masculine biology positions the brain, and that's how the feminine biology positions the female brain. But then again, all the human characteristics that are beyond our biology are meant to actually make us both better at being ourselves.
No, it's beautiful stuff. And you see it even reflected in the liturgy that like the church as the bride of Christ is welcoming the children in together, yet the priest concludes the liturgy, go, the mass is finished, go out. And so he's sending out that ultimately we're not just supposed to be gathered together in intimacy, we're being sent on mission. And so we live it out in our humanity, we'll live it out in our spirituality as well. But I mean, we've covered a lot of awesome stuff, so I can't thank you enough, but I want you to let the listeners know how can they connect with you. I know you just launched a new podcast, maybe any websites, the town hall stuff, the new podcast. Let people know how they can connect with you if they want to dive deeper.
Yep, we just launched the podcast, Being Human. So that's on all the podcast channels. And it's Being Human with Dr. Greg Bottaro. Found out afterwards there's a few other podcasts by the same title. So I've got the picture of, it's the icon of Michelangelo's creation from the Sistine Chapel that's on the cover. So look for that. And then we are doing this town hall tomorrow, Friday night, 7:30 p.m. You can register for that at catholicpsych.com/townhall. And that's our main website, catholicpsych.com. There's a contact page there to get in touch or anything else that you're looking for. We have a bunch of resources in the store there as well.
Okay, and then all those links I'm going to be posting below once this goes on YouTube, on the podcast. You can just click the link and go straight to those things. Don't forget also to click the link below on the Hallow app. I don't know if you know that, but they just added, I think, 9 different sleep stories that you can do. You've got Jackie Francois Angel, Bobby Angel, Father Josh Jackson. I've got one in there. Just stuff to help you to rest at the end of the day so that instead of falling into anxiety, letting your imagination go on this merry-go-round of the future, the past, maybe try something new. Check out the Hallow app. It's free for 14 days. You click the link in the bio, hallow.com/lust is boring. And believe me, that's going to do a world of wonders for you when it comes to your anxiety. Anxiety in rush hour traffic, just pop in the rosary. That'll help you the anxiety there. And so that'll be a real gift. And then also, please don't forget, if you want to click the link below for Patreon to support us there. It helps our family so much, especially during this time of COVID where basically like 80 to 90% of our in-person assemblies that we used to do to support the ministry have been wiped out because of the schools doing all the social distance stuff. So, this is a huge way to help our family and our ministry continue to keep this message going. But also check out Dr. Greg's stuff there. Websites, links, all the stuff is below. But Dr. Greg, thank you for so much. I mean, I've enjoyed our conversation thoroughly, and I can't wait for our listeners to benefit on all the stuff you just shared with them.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love the stuff that you're doing, and I'm happy to support you. And thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much. God bless.
God bless you.